For thousands of years, the pyramids have stood as silent guardians of history, massive monuments rising from the desert, their perfect lines pointing toward the heavens. They were built long before modern machinery. Yet even today, no one fully understands how such colossal structures were raised with such precision. Across the world, from the sands of Egypt to the jungles of Central America, pyramids appear again and again, as if distant civilizations were guided by the same mysterious blueprint. Some are tombs, others temples, and a few still defy any explanation at all. Were they simply architectural marvels, or do they conceal a deeper knowledge lost to time? What makes the mystery even greater is that each stone, each carving seems to whisper a question that has echoed for millennia: who truly built them, and why? These unanswered riddles turn ancient ruins into something more than history. They become living puzzles that continue to challenge us today. And tonight, you're not just a viewer. Imagine yourself as an archaeologist brushing away the desert sand, an explorer stepping into a dark chamber, or simply an ordinary person joining this journey of discovery. Don't forget to follow the channel to keep exploring with us, and leave a comment below with the exact time and place you're listening from. After all, your moment may be part of the mystery too. The Abydos King List Mystery. Pharaohs erased from time. You step through the cool shadows of the Temple of Seti. Eye the limestone damp beneath your hands. Bas-reliefs of dynasties past surround you. Your guide mentions casually that one wall inside holds a list of all rulers of Egypt, yet something about his tone feels guarded. When you finally stand before the carved register, the Luxor's Valley of the King burial shaft, KV-55 sits partly collapsed. Discovered in 1907, it contained a single gilded coffin, but the mummy inside was stripped of identifying gold foil. Scholars have debated whether the remains belong to Akhenaten Smenkhkare or another royal. You descend wooden stairs into the cool darkness. The smell of earth and mummification resin fills the air. Torchlight flickers off painted walls with erasures where names once were. Your visit was encouraged by a geneticist who sequenced DNA from the KV-55 mummy. He found markers linking it to Tutankhamun, suggesting a close familial relationship. He hoped a writer's perspective could frame the scientific results for the public. With permission, you enter the tomb with him, his voice explaining mitochondrial DNA as you navigate the corridor. At the burial chamber, the gilded coffin lies open and empty. The bones were moved long ago to Cairo's museum. In the tomb, you notice curses and prayers carved in haste. The plaster is uneven, suggesting a hurried burial. A faint etching near the entrance shows a solar disk and elongated figures hallmarks of the Amarna period. Suddenly the temperature dips. You see your breath. A gust of cool air rushes from deeper in the chamber. Whispering sounds float by like distant chanting. Your companion's flashlight flickers, then steadies. You feel uneasy but fascinated. Back at the lab, you watch as the geneticist loads bone samples. He explains that the KVIF mummy likely is Akhenaten or his brother Smenkhkare, both sons of Amenhotep III. The age of the bones appears inconsistent. One analysis suggests a man in his 20s, another in his 50s. The mitochondrial DNA matches that of Tutankhamun and a mummy thought to be his mother. The conflicting data fuels debate. You read journals of early archaeologists who argued over the coffin's feminine inscriptions. Nothing is definitive. Theories persist. Some believe the mummy is Akhenaten reburied with little ceremony after his heretical reign. Others advocate for Smenkhkare, a short-lived pharaoh whose name is all but erased. A theory posits that the bones are composites of more than one person. There are suggestions that the tomb was deliberately desecrated to break a curse or to conceal gender identity. Each proposal reflects different readings of scant evidence. When you think back to the tomb, you hear the whispered voices and feel the cool gust. Sometimes you see a face with elongated features in the corner of your eye. The KV-55 mummy, whoever he was, refuses to settle quietly into history. He remains a puzzle for geneticists, archaeologists, and storytellers, a set of bones without a name, whispering through time. The lost capital of Ichtewi, Pharaoh's vanished city in the Middle Kingdom of ancient Egypt. Pharaoh Amenemhat moved the royal capital from Thebes to a city called Ichtawi, Caesar of the Two Lands. Its exact location remains uncertain. Some archaeologists believe it lies near modern-day Lisht, while others propose the Fayum region. The Nile's shifting course may have buried it under silt. Papyrus records describe canals, temples, and gardens. You ride in a small motorboat along a branch of the Nile at sunset. Reed beds glow gold. The air smells of mud and water lilies. You're on your way to survey mounds with a remote sensing team. A letter from an Egyptologist friend spurred your trip. She wrote that satellite imagery revealed rectangular anomalies in the floodplain reminiscent of urban grids. Come see before the season's over, she urged. You disembark onto soft ground, following her to a field dotted with pottery shards. Magnetometers beep as they trace subsurface structures. On a computer screen, faint lines appear, foundations of walls. Excitement buzzes. You pick up a fragment of faience-glazed blue, its color still vibrant. As dusk deepens, mosquitoes swarm. You watch the river glint. A donkey brays in the distance. You sense a presence beneath your feet, ghostly streets where officials once walked. In your mind's eye, you see columns, rising canals flowing with lotus. A gust of wind carries the scent of incense. You look down and see that the faience fragment in your hand now feels warm. You close your eyes and hear faint laughter and the splash of oars. You open your eyes, the field is dark. Back in Cairo, you read journals. Some researchers argue that Lishta's pyramids of Amenemhat Win and Senusret Am mark the area of Ijitawi. Others cite textual references to marshlands nearer Fayum. Excavations have uncovered houses at Lisht, but not a full capital. The Nile's meandering may have eroded much. Political shifts after Amenemhat may have led to deliberate dismantling. The magnetometer data are promising, but inconclusive. Theories Ijitawi may lie under thick Nile silt, accessible only with deep drilling. It could be partly under modern villages, its buildings reused. Or perhaps our notion of a capital city doesn't apply. The court might have moved seasonally. The warmth of the faience could be body heat. The incense smell might be river plants. Yet the sense of presence persists. Back home, you keep the blue shard on your desk. It catches light in a way that reminds you of water. You occasionally dip your fingers in a bowl of water, imagining a canal in a vanished city. Ijitawi remains elusive, but continues to draw researchers much like the river draws silt. Some mysteries are buried gradually over centuries, waiting for patient hands to uncover them. Why Egyptians defaced royal tombs. Erased names and chipped faces in Egyptian tombs hint at political, religious, and personal motives. Walking through the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, I noticed a curious pattern: cartouches chiseled away, faces gouged from reliefs, and inscriptions defaced. In one tomb, the name of a pharaoh had been replaced by another. In another, only the outlines remained where a king once stood. At first, I assumed tomb robbers had inflicted the damage. Then an Egyptologist explained that some defacement was intentional, carried out by the state or rivals. Intrigued by this desecration, I decided to investigate why Egyptians who prized the afterlife would mar the resting places of their rulers. The hook came from a newly discovered tomb with methodical erasures of a queen's name. Scholars believe the defacement was ordered by her successor. This suggested politics rather than mere vandalism. Unraveling motive required delving into dynastic rivalries. Ancient Egyptians believed a person's name and image allowed them to exist in the afterlife. Erasing a name or destroying a face could condemn someone to oblivion. Pharaohs like Hatshepsut had their monuments defaced by successors to legitimize new regimes. Akhenaten's images were smashed after his religious revolution failed. Sometimes tomb owners themselves erased names of those who fell out of favor. Other times, thieves defaced images to neutralize protective spells. Not all damage occurred in antiquity. Early explorers and tourists also left marks. In a recently opened tomb, I saw the name of a lesser-known queen carefully chiseled out of her sarcophagus while her husband's name remained untouched. The erasure was so precise that the rest of the inscription was preserved. In another tomb, faces of servants were scratched away, suggesting an attempt to depersonalize them. An Astrakhan pottery shard found nearby contained a scribe's note complaining about orders to alter inscriptions. These findings indicated organized efforts rather than random vandalism. Tensions rose when I interviewed a guard who believed defacement angered spirits. He refused to enter certain tombs after sundown. Later, a group of tourists was caught scratching their initials on a wall, prompting outrage. The incident highlighted ongoing challenges of preservation and respect. Meanwhile, an academic debate flared between those who attribute defacement to iconoclasm and those who emphasize ritual renewal, arguing that erasures sometimes accompanied changes in titles or religious transformations. Erasing names served multiple purposes, legitimizing new kings, punishing rivals, or altering the meaning of a tomb. In a culture where memory equated to immortality, erasure was a potent tool. However, not all defacements were malicious. During restorations, artists sometimes remove names to correct errors or repurpose tombs. The pattern of defacement reflects shifts in power and belief. The act of chipping away at a cartouche reveals how history is literally rewritten. Modern parallels exist when regimes remove statues or rename streets. Theories explaining defacement include: 1. Political damnatio memoriae, to erase a rival; 2. Religious reform, eliminating references to disfavored gods; 3. Protective measures, neutralizing spells to allow tomb reuse; 4. Vandalism by thieves or later visitors. Each instance must be considered in context. Recognizing which theory applies requires analyzing inscriptions dating the damage and understanding historical events. The chiseled cartouches remain, their absent names speaking volumes about power and memory. As we restore and protect these tombs, we also interpret the motivations behind their alterations. Future discoveries may reveal more ostraca or inscriptions shedding light on specific cases. The defaced tombs remind us that history is contested and that what one generation venerates another may seek to erase. In that sense, the Valley of the Kings continues to be an active archive of human politics and belief. Bermuda, Triangle of Disappearances. From the deck of your research vessel, the Atlantic stretches endlessly in every direction. Clouds gather on the horizon, a hazy line where sea meets sky. You sail through a region sailors whisper about the Bermuda Triangle. Charts place you roughly between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. Stories of vanished ships and aircraft linger here like the scent of diesel in the air. governments. Debris identified as part of MH370 appears in Madagascar, Réunion, and elsewhere. Simulations predict where the plane might have entered the water. A few internet forums spin conspiracy webs, linking the flight to secret military bases or alien abduction. The lack of a definitive answer fuels speculation. The journal and ring you found remain enigmatic pieces. Explanations range from straightforward pilot actions to elaborate plots. The official Malaysian report says the aircraft was deliberately diverted. French investigators note technical data gaps. A possibility is that a fire incapacitated the crew. Another is decompression leading to hypoxia. None are fully supported. The void in the sky where MH370 disappeared is as frustrating as the void in the ocean. Families oscillate between hope and despair. Sometimes when you fly, turbulence feels like a message. You grip the armrest harder. At airports, you glance at departure boards for flight numbers that will never land. The family's faces stay with you. MH370 remains an open wound, reminding us that in an age of satellite surveillance and data, a massive airliner can still vanish, taking stories with it. Real age of the Sphinx, erosion and time. The Great Sphinx of Giza crouches like a lion, its limestone body weathered by millennia. Most Egyptologists date it to around 2500 BCE, carved for Pharaoh Khafra, but some geologists argue its erosion patterns indicate far greater age, perhaps predating dynastic Egypt. As tourists snap selfies, you step aside and place your palm on the flank. The stone is rough and cool despite the desert heat. You squint at grooves in the enclosure wall, vertical channels worn as if by rainfall, not the horizontal scars of sand. The Sahara hasn't seen heavy rain for thousands of years. A geologist friend invited you to examine the site with fresh eyes. You accepted, yearning to feel the weight of time beyond human memory. It began with an email. Do you want to see something the guides won't show? The sender attached photos of sediment layers and rock samples. You met him at dawn by the paws of the Sphinx. The area was cordoned off. He pointed out cross-bedding in the stone, indicating prolonged exposure to running water. He gave you a special permit to enter a rarely accessed trench carved around the monument. You descended into shadow. The smell of limestone was almost sweet, mixed with camel dung from above. You ran your hand along the enclosure wall, feeling deep rounded channels that look like miniature canyons. As you measure the depth of the erosion, clouds gather. The sky clear moments before it darkens. A wind picks up, carrying grit. Without warning, fat drops of rain splatter the sand. Thunder rumbles across the plateau. Rain in Giza is rare. Water pours into the trench, tracing the very channels you study. For a moment, you imagine an earlier Egypt lush with savanna and lakes. The Sphinx's face appears to weep as water streams from its eyes. Lightning flashes, the ground trembles. Then, as abruptly as it began, the rain stops. The sun reasserts itself. The desert steams. Your notes are soaked, but your mind races. Back in your hotel, you compare your measurements with rainfall records. Some scholars propose climate shifts around 7000 BCE brought heavy rains to the plateau. You read that the Sphinx appears in the inventory stela, which mentions it existed before Khafra. You contact geologists who posit deep weathering could result from groundwater or salt exfoliation instead of rain. A prehistory researcher tells you of oral traditions describing a lion guardian older than the pyramids. Egyptologists push back, pointing out there is no archaeological context earlier than the Old Kingdom. Theories swirl. A pre-dynastic culture carved the Sphinx in an era of monsoon rains. Khafra later reworked it. The grooves are from soluble salts dissolving the limestone. The monument was carved into a natural Yardang wind-carved rock, and later shaped. Or perhaps the geologists misinterpret the data. Each camp cites evidence, none conclusively wins. That night you dream of a verdant plain where a lion with a human face gazes over tall grass. Herds of gazelle move nearby. People in simple leather garments dance around the statue. You wake to the sound of rain on your window, though the forecast predicted clear skies. You step outside. The pavement is wet. In the morning, news reports say it rained in parts of Cairo, a rarity in summer. You wonder if the Sphinx remembers and calls the rain. Spontaneous human combustion, fire from within. Reports through history describe people bursting into flames without external ignition. Their bodies reduced to ash while surroundings remain relatively unscathed. The strange phenomena are grouped under the term spontaneous human combustion, SHC. Skeptics argue that a dropped cigarette and the wick effect explain such cases. Believers point to blue flames and inexplicably rapid burning. You stand in the charred remains of an old farmhouse in rural Kentucky. Soot stains the ceiling above a blackened chair. On the floor, original wooden boards are unburned except for a circular patch. A distant cousin told you your great-great-grandfather was found here in 1899, reduced to ash, his chair intact. You want to see where it happened. The cousin mailed you a photocopy of an 1899 newspaper article. The description was vivid. Only a greasy spot and a few calcined bones remained. A note from the coroner speculated the victim's high alcohol intake contributed. In the farmhouse, sunlight streams through broken windows. The air smells of dust and old. You find an old tobacco tin in the attic containing letters. One is from your ancestor complaining of internal heat and a strange humming in his ears. His handwriting grows shaky near the end. You tuck the tin into your bag. That night at a nearby bed and breakfast, you wake to an intense heat in your abdomen. Panic flares. You jump from bed and splash water on yourself. Blue sparks dance briefly along your arms, vanishing as quickly as they appear. The air smells faintly of ozone. Your heart pounds. In the morning, you find a patch of cracked skin where the heat emanated. Was it psychosomatic manifested by your research or something more? You dive into literature. Some scientists cite the wick effect. A human body's fat can soak clothing and act like a candle wick burning steadily once ignited. In SHC cases, victims often were elderly alone near open flame. Others note that acetone produced by ketosis could make breath flammable. There are accounts of static electricity igniting gases. Parapsychologists suggest stress or trauma triggers an internal reaction. None of these fully explains why furniture remains intact and flames don't spread. Perhaps this is a combination of factors: alcohol, obesity, flammable clothing, and an ignition source. Maybe there are chemical compounds in our bodies that, under rare conditions, self-ignite. Or the stories are exaggerations born of horror and myth. The letters from your ancestor hint at awareness of an internal heat building. Could a physiological condition cause a feeling of burning and eventual immolation? Theories remain unproven. You return home cautious around open flames. Yet sometimes while reading in bed, a blue spark arcs from your finger to the page. Once a candle flame flares as you walk by, then returns to normal. Friends tease you about thinking you might burst into flames. You laugh, but a whiff of smoke on a still day makes your heart skip. In your dreams, you stand in a ring of blue fire, feeling neither heat nor pain, just an overwhelming sense of release. The Aluboid statues, reptilian figures of Mesopotamia. In the 1920s, archaeologists excavating at Alubaid in Iraq unearthed strange figurines dating to the Ubaid period, circa 4500-4000 BCE. The statues depict humanoid figures with lizard-like heads, large almond eyes, and elongated limbs. Some hold infants with similar features. Conspiracy theorists cite them as evidence of reptilian aliens interbreeding with humans. Scholars suggest they represent gods, snakes symbolizing fertility or water. You're at an estate sale in London when you spot a small clay figurine matching these descriptions. It is cracked but intact, clutching a baby. A note tucked beside it reads, "Tell nobody, return to source." Intrigued, you buy it and contact a museum curator. You travel to Baghdad's Iraqi Museum, where similar statues are displayed under glass. The curator examines your piece, noting incisions under the base. These marks do not match known inscriptions. With careful hands, you remove a clay plug. Inside is a rolled bitumen scroll. Unrolling it reveals pictographs of figures with elongated heads interacting with humans holding offerings. The curator's eyes widen. He suggests the scroll may contain myth or ritual instructions. You sense a ripple of something old stirring. As you discuss the find, the room's temperature drops. Glass cases vibrate softly. A faint hiss echoes from somewhere in the museum. A guard reports seeing a lizard scurry near a display, but none are found. Your figurine develops a hairline crack. A thin trail of oil oozes out and evaporates. The curator stares, murmuring a prayer. You leave the museum feeling watched. Back at your hotel, you research. Some researchers believe the figurines depict snake gods like Ningish Zida or Enki, symbolizing fertility, water, and renewal. Others argue they are stylized humans with exaggerated features. Fringe theorists point to ancient astronaut hypotheses. There is no textual evidence of reptilian beings, only plastic representations. The pictographs you found may be mythological scenes or early writing attempts. A linguist friend cannot decipher them, noting they predate cuneiform. Explanations vary. The statues could be cult objects representing priests wearing serpent masks. They might depict chthonic beings from creation myths. The oil may be bitumen used in ritual. The note's warning could indicate illicit excavation. Or perhaps the figures symbolized an aspect of human psychology now lost. The reptilian conspiracy holds no weight among scholars, but it captures imaginations. At night, you hear faint scratching in the walls of your hotel. You dream of standing knee-deep in marsh water as serpentine creatures emerge, offering you clay figurines. Their eyes are enormous, unblinking. When you wake, your pillow is damp. You decide to donate the statue and scroll to the museum, feeling immense relief when you hand them over. Still, sometimes you spot lizards basking where none should be watching you, with disconcerting stillness. The Koso artifact, spark plug in stone. In 1961, 3 rock hounds were hunting geodes near Olancha, California, when they cracked open a stone and found something unexpected: a corroded metal cylinder with a porcelain core and a hexagonal casing. It resembled a spark plug encased in a 300,000-year-old rock. Dubbed the Koso artifact, it fueled speculation about ancient advanced technology. The artifact's whereabouts are now uncertain. You browse a swap meet in the Mojave Desert sunlight, baking the asphalt. Among boxes of rocks, a vendor hands you a weighty concretion. Found near Koso Range, he says. You tap it. The sound is hollow. Your curiosity flares. You buy the concretion and take it to a lapidary shop. The owner saws it open carefully. Inside is an iron core surrounded by ceramic and what looks like a steel sleeve. A small washer and spring are visible. It looks strikingly like a spark plug. Yet the surrounding matrix appears old, filled with embedded pebbles. You feel a thrill and a twinge of skepticism. Could this be another piece of the Koso artifact? Or a hoax? You contact a geologist friend. Ancient alien enthusiasts contested this, citing the weirdness of finding it inside a stone. The artifact disappeared after the 1960s. Rumors place it in a private collection. Possible explanations are prosaic. The artifact is a modern spark plug, around which a concretion formed later misrepresented as ancient. There is no evidence of advanced ancient machines. Or perhaps someone planted it as a joke to see who would bite. Your concretion likely formed similarly. The thrill of the unknown fades but leaves you with appreciation for geology's ability to encase and preserve. At home, you display the bisected concretion on your shelf. It sparks conversation and prompts you to explain the difference between natural oddities and extraordinary claims. Occasionally, when you pass by, you think about all the other mundane objects the Earth will someday encase confusing future rockhounds. The Kozo artifact taught you to balance wonder with skeptical inquiry. The Karnak Sound Temple, Vibrations of the Gods. Within the vast temple complex of Karnak in Luxor, Egypt, stands a small chamber that produces an eerie resonant tone when certain stones are struck. Some call it the Sound Temple or the Precinct of Ptah. Carved granite columns emit deep notes when tapped vibrations felt through bone. The phenomenon hints at an ancient understanding of acoustics. You walk through an avenue of sphinxes into the temple, warm sunlight on your shoulders. Incense hung in the air. Tourists cluster in hypostyle halls, but few know of the resonating chamber. A local guide leads you quietly to a small room with polished stone walls. You were tipped off by a sound engineer who visited and felt transformed. Inside the chamber, the guide hands you a small wooden mallet. Tap here, he instructs, pointing to a column. You strike gently. A deep bell-like tone reverberates through the room and into your chest. It lasts several seconds. You tap a different stone, and a higher tone sings. The room seems to respond. Your skin tingles. The air vibrates. You try singing a note, and it amplifies, resonating with the stone. As you experiment, your mind drifts. You imagine priests chanting hymns, hear sound waves amplifying prayers to Ptah, god of craftsmen. The vibrations might have induced trance. You hum a descending scale. Midway, your voice seems to split, harmonizing with itself. For a moment, you see flickering torches and feel cool water at your feet. Then you are back with the guide, smiling knowingly. Later, you research. Acoustic scientists have measured frequencies of resonant stones in Karnak. Some suggest stones with certain quartz content vibrate when struck. Builders may have selected blocks intentionally. Ancient texts refer to singers that protected temples. A few scholars propose sound was used for healing or to enhance rituals. Others caution that resonance could be accidental. Still, the experience leaves you believing in the intentional use of acoustics. Theories include the chamber was designed to produce specific tones aligning with chants. The vibrations had physiological effects, or it's a coincidence exploited later by guides. The vision you had could be imagination triggered by sensory input, but sound has power, and ancient architects may have known this. Back home, you tap the rim of a wine glass and listen as it sings. You experiment with tones in your living room, recalling Karnak. Your cat tilts its head at the vibrating air. You smile, contemplating how stone and sound intertwine across cultures and centuries. The temple's note lingers in your bones long after you've left. The lost city of Pavlopetri, streets under the sea. Off the coast of Laconia in southern Greece lies Pavlopetri, one of the oldest submerged sea-gate cities in the world. Discovered in 1967, its stone walls, roads, and courtyards sit just a few meters below the surface. Dating to at least 3000 BCE, it offers a snapshot of Mycenaean town planning. Sea currents and sand have preserved floor plans. You don scuba gear, salty breeze on your face. The Mediterranean water is clear and cool. As you descend, ruins emerge from the sandy bottom, low walls forming rooms, streets leading to a central square. Fish dart among ancient doorways. You joined a marine archaeology team after responding to a call for volunteers who could swim and map. The dive leader briefs you on protocols: no touching, no stirring sediment. Underwater, you see pottery shards half buried. You float over a rectangular basin believed to be a cistern. Sunlight ripples across stone. Your heart fills with awe. You imagine the city alive, children running through alleys, traders hauling nets. A sudden current chills your neck. You turn and think you see a shadow of someone watching from a doorway. It's gone when you look again. Back on the boat, you review 3D scans. The city's layout shows advanced planning. Streets align with cardinal directions. Some houses have courtyards with wells. Underwater excavations reveal boom weights indicating textile production. The city likely sank after earthquakes or sea level rise. Locals tell of earthquakes long ago swallowing a town. The site continues to erode, threatened by anchors and tourism. Researchers propose Pavlopetri was an early trading port. Its submergence may have preserved it better than terrestrial sites. Future dives with robots will map further. Conservationists urge restrictions. Myths of Atlantis stir the public. But Pavlopetri proves that real sunken cities exist. The shadow you saw could be a large fish, or your mind animating the past. Possible conclusions: Pavlopetri demonstrates Mycenaean urban planning and maritime activity. It sank due to natural causes. The sense of being watched underwater may come from heightened awareness. Yet there is something profound about swimming through streets last walked thousands of years ago. It collapses time. Back home, you fill a bathtub and drop a miniature toy house into the water, watching bubbles escape. You imagine a city slowly submerging. Pavlopetri remains beneath the waves, silent but alive in your memory. When you shower, you sometimes smell salt water and see sunlight dancing on tile like on submerged stones. You plan to return to dive again. The Lovelock Cave Giants. Legends of red-haired enemies. Lovelock Cave in Nevada holds ancient artifacts and guano. The Paiute people tell stories of a race of red-haired giants called Si-Te-Ka, who were enemies of their ancestors. According to legend, the Paiute trapped and burned the giants in the cave. In the early 20th century, guano miners found bones in baskets here. Some reports mention unusually large bones, fueling speculation about giants. Scientists classify the remains as consistent with normal human sizes. You stand at the mouth of the cave, sunsetting over the desert. The air is dry and smells of dust and rodent droppings. You heard the legend from a Paiute storyteller at a cultural event. Moved by her tale, you drove to Lovelock to visit the cave. Inside, the temperature drops. The cave walls narrow and curve. You use a headlamp to see old matting and broken baskets partially buried. You imagine people living here, weaving and storing food. You come to a blackened alcove where soot coats the ceiling. You think a fire of screams echoing. Your heart quickens. As you stand quietly, a bat flits past your head. Its wings brush your hair. You startle and inhale guano dust, coughing. In the beam of your light, dust motes swirl like spirits. For a brief moment, you hear a low moan, deep and mournful. It could be wind passing through cracks. You feel empathy for both sides of the legend's survival and extinction. You exit the cave and breathe in warm, desert air. Back in town, a museum exhibits artifacts recovered from Lovelock Cave duck decoys made of Thule sandals tools. Photographs show original excavations. An anthropologist explains that initial reports of giant bones likely came from misidentified bare femurs or exaggeration. DNA tests on recovered human remains indicate Native American ancestry. The red hair might result from hair turning reddish over time. Yet the legend persists, retold as cautionary tale and identity marker. Possible interpretations: the Site-Ka represent an early non-Paiute group with whom there was conflict. The giants could be metaphoric, emphasizing strength rather than size. The burning of enemies in a cave may symbolize conquest and reclamation, or perhaps settlers embellished stories to dramatize finds. The moan you heard was likely the cave's breathing. Driving away under a blood-orange sky, you see distant hills tinged red by the setting sun. You think of the legend and how stories color landscapes. Later, when someone mentions giants, you remember the cave's smell and the storyteller's cadence. Myths are powerful whether or not bones back them up. They reflect relationships between people, place, and memory. Voynich manuscript, an illustrated codex written in an unknown script, resists decipherment, fueling centuries of intrigue. In a rare book room at Yale, a librarian placed a 15th century volume before me. Its vellum pages contain delicate drawings of plants, astronomical diagrams, and naked women immersed in green pools. Surrounding the images was text in a script that has baffled linguists for a century. Known as the Voynich manuscript after the dealer who bought it in 1912, it has inspired codebreakers, cryptographers, and conspiracy theorists. I spent weeks studying high-resolution scans, visiting scholars who have devoted their careers to cracking the code and examining historical context. The more I learned, the deeper the mystery became. The hook was a claim by a computer scientist that he had used AI to decipher a few words, suggesting the language was a mixture of Latin and Hebrew. If true, it would be a major breakthrough. I wanted to evaluate his method and results. Radiocarbon dating places the manuscript's vellum at 1404 to 1438. Its script is unique with about 20-30 distinct characters. The illustrations depict unknown plants, astrological charts, and bathing women connected by tubes. Some scholars think it's a pharmacopoeia. Others view it as an elaborate hoax. Proposed authors include Roger Bacon, Leonardo da Vinci, and a 16th century alchemist. Statistical analysis shows the text has linguistic properties unlike random gibberish. Yet, attempts to match it to known languages have failed. At a conference, the computer scientist presented his AI analysis. He used pattern recognition to match recurring glyphs with known linguistic roots. His results translated a phrase as "light bring peace." However, other linguists pointed out that his system was trained on the manuscript itself, risking circular reasoning. I met a medievalist who proposed the text might be written in a natural language, encrypted using a substitution cipher. Another suggested it could be a constructed language. I attempted a manual analysis of a few lines, but made no progress. Tension escalated when a YouTuber claimed to have cracked the code and accused academic researchers of incompetence. The video went viral, bringing thousands of messages to the library. Some visitors demanded to see the manuscript, while others accused Yale of hiding the truth. The librarian had to reinforce security. Scholars scrambled to respond, pointing out flaws in the YouTuber's translation, which turned out to be Google translated Italian. The episode showed how quickly misinformation spreads. After weeks of study, I leaned toward the theory that the Voynich manuscript is a pre-modern scientific text encoded in a cipher. Its consistent orthography and statistical patterns suggest it conveys information. However, without a key, decipherment may be impossible. The allure of the manuscript lies partly in our desire for secrets. It It functions as a Rorschach test. People project fantasies of lost knowledge onto its pages. The challenge brings together cryptographers, historians, linguists, and amateurs, demonstrating the interdisciplinary nature of solving ancient puzzles. Theories about the Voynich manuscript include 1. It is a ciphered natural language awaiting decryption. 2. It is a constructed language. 3. It is a hoax with meaningless text. 4. It is glossolalia, produced by a person in an altered state. Each theory has evidence and counter-arguments. Without external references or a Rosetta Stone, the debate continues. Even if deciphered, we might find it's a mundane herbal manual. As I turned the last page of the manuscript, still uncomprehending, I felt both frustration and admiration. The Voynich has guarded its secrets for centuries. Perhaps a new approach like quantum computing or undiscovered archival clues will unlock it. Or maybe it will remain an enigma, reminding us that not all mysteries yield to analysis. Either way, the manuscript continues to inspire curiosity and collaboration across disciplines.